Imagine for a second that your thoughts aren't merely reflections. What if they are messages, divine guidance sent to you directly? This thought-provoking question compels us to examine the things we usually brush aside. How often has a seemingly mundane thought brought you unexpected clarity, perhaps an idea to help someone in need? Could these moments be more than mere coincidences? In the hustle and bustle of daily life, it's easy to lose focus on the little things, work, worries, routine, and miss out on opportunities that could have a life-altering impact. But God, in His infinite wisdom, uses these moments to speak to us. He doesn't let us ignore them. God doesn't always use overt signs or manifestations. Sometimes He uses the most subtle ways to speak to us, planting ideas that, if we pay attention, can change our lives. Have you ever felt the need to contact someone you haven't spoken to in a long time, or had a vivid memory of someone at an apparently random moment? Uncertainty, as if it were a simple solution, can actually be God's voice urging us to take action, reflect, or trust. The trouble is, we tend to brush these indications off, attributing them to random chance or worse, not giving them any weight at all. Today, I invite you to consider how God may be communicating with you through your thoughts. Let's investigate together how. To recognize these instances and not allow them to pass unnoticed, because frequently the answers we seek can be found in the most mundane of places. Sometimes all it takes is a moment of mindfulness to uncover the profound significance of our thoughts. Consider an event that may have occurred to you, a sudden realization that arises just as you're about to make a significant decision, or the overwhelming sense of tranquility that appears out of nowhere in the midst of a challenging circumstance. Perhaps you disregarded it at the time, but upon reflection, you see the significance of that moment. In this video, you will learn 15 ways that God uses our thoughts to direct us. These methods are straightforward, but they are powerful enough to help you realize that God is closer than you think. I implore you to remain with me until the end, because Before we go any further, I have a simple request. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. That way, I can keep sending you videos like this one, which will encourage you on your journey and show you the way God wants you to go. This last lesson could be the most important one I ever share. Let's begin this journey by imagining that you're driving in silence, trying to organize your thoughts amidst the worries of the day and bills to pay. You'll learn to recognize God's presence in every detail of our lives and to hear His voice even in the most unexpected situations. Have you ever experienced a situation where you were in the midst of a conversation you still needed to have, or an important decision you couldn't make, and then, out of nowhere, an idea comes to you? It's not just any thought, though. It arrives with unexpected clarity, bringing a sense of peace that contrasts with all the chaos. It's a common occurrence, but we tend to ignore them because we're too busy. It could be more than just a coincidence. It's like right in the middle of all the chaos, divine guidance shows up. It could be an answer you weren't even aware you were seeking, or advice that totally shifts your perspective on the problem. The truth is, God speaks to us in simple yet profound ways. The Bible is full of examples like this. For example, the story of Elijah, the prophet, who endured spiritual and physical challenges. During his trials, he prayed to hear God's voice, but instead of a raging tempest or blazing fire, God spoke to him in a low, low voice. 1 Kings 19:12. This teaches us a powerful lesson. God does not always speak in a loud, obvious way. God speaks to us in small, subtle ways, just when we're ready to hear Him. Perhaps He's trying to tell you something when you're feeling overwhelmed, but a thought pops into your head that clarifies everything. Or maybe He's trying to tell you something when you're experiencing an overwhelming sense of calm, but you can't put your finger on it. It's easy to dismiss these moments as insignificant in the midst of our hectic daily lives, but if we pay attention, God guides us through quiet thoughts that arrive without fanfare, but carry a conviction that we cannot ignore. This concept may seem simple, but it has transformative power. If you are paying attention, you will notice that they contain answers, directions, and even invitations to something bigger. And that's not all. In this video, we will explore 15 ways God uses your thoughts to communicate with you. I promise that by the end, you will see how God is already at work in your life, even if you haven't noticed it yet. Even the most ordinary moments can be packed with profound meaning that can change your life, your journey. So brace yourself because the adventure is about to start. Now let's delve into these teachings one by one and find out how God is at work in your mind. The last point will be the most transformative, so hang in there. What comes next might alter your perspective on the challenges you've encountered. In order to grasp the relevance of this message to your life, have you ever experienced a state of near despair and an overwhelming desire for solitude, when external noises and internal anxieties blend into an overwhelming cacophony? In such a moment, finding clarity appears to be an insurmountable task, but it is precisely in these, in times of chaos, God speaks most powerfully. It is in the stillness that we dreadfully confront that he discovers us. The prophet Elijah went through something similar. Beset with death threats and completely powerless, he fled into the wilderness, where he prayed frantically, expecting to hear from God. This story teaches us a valuable lesson. God does not compete with chaos. Elijah expected the answer to come in a strong wind, an earthquake, or fire, but none of these manifestations were from God. When the noise stopped, a soft murmur, barely audible whisper emerged, and it was there that Elijah finally heard the divine voice. This story is found in 1 Kings 19:11-12. He doesn't have to raise his voice to be heard. His voice is more like a call to quiet the chaos in our lives and the world around us. It's like trying to see through a stormy lake. The waters are choppy and murky, making it impossible to see what's below. But when the storm passes, the waters calm down, and we can see clearly. God's thoughts, though subtle at times, can have a profoundly transformative impact on our lives when we pay attention to them. In today's fast-paced, information-overloaded world, where efficiency and speed are highly prized, the noise we endure extends well beyond external events. It originates within us. If you're ever dealing with tough decisions, feeling overwhelmed or even lost, searching for answers that never seem to come, or maybe you're trying to find them in the midst of a crisis, remember that God reveals his will precisely when we face our fears and vulnerabilities in silence. It's not easy to hear God speaking to you when all the noise, both external and internal, is making it impossible to focus on what he has to say. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to step away from your worries, disconnect from distractions, and listen? Allow yourself to be still. It is in this stillness that God shows himself. He does not try to outdo the chaos, but rather waits for you to be ready to meet him there. As you think about this message, what about sharing it with others? Leave a comment with your viewing location and a like to help spread the word. Even though Jesus spent 40 days in the desert alone, enduring temptation, loneliness, and the pain of being cut off from all comforts, it was in this difficult environment that he confirmed his divine identity and fortified his mission. Following his time in the desert, Luke 41:1-13, Jesus found clarity rather than defeat. This is the most important lesson we can learn from Jesus. We too need deserts, not in the literal sense, but in the sense of times when we separate ourselves from the hustle and bustle of life and the expectations of others. In these moments of stillness, we can hear something greater, no matter how small. Even though we live in a fast-paced world, it's important to seek out moments of quiet so that God can speak to us. When we do, we'll discover that the silence is like a blank canvas. At first, it may feel empty, purposeless, and even uncomfortable. However, as we surrender to its presence, God will paint profound truths into our lives, that He reveals the things that truly matter, even in the midst of the chaos of everyday life. Maybe you're facing a lot of pressure right now from work, family, and important decisions that don't seem to have any clear answers. It's like being in the middle of a storm, with everyone pulling you in different directions. Perhaps God is inviting you to find His voice amidst all this chaos. Let's try something new today, putting down our phones, finding a peaceful spot, and closing our eyes. Instead of running away, let's listen. Here's something interesting. God doesn't demand drastic changes or asks us to leave everything and live in the desert like Jesus did. Sometimes all He wants is 5 minutes of your quiet. It's enough to simply pray for guidance. God may not answer with a resounding thunderclap or a profound revelation, but a subtle idea may arise that offers serenity or a path you hadn't thought of before. In these moments of quiet, something mystical takes place, and we come to understand that God does more than just speak. He also brings something even more profound, something that surpasses all. Having this peace is like having an anchor in the middle of a storm. It reminds us that even when everything seems to be falling apart, He is still in control. It is this peace that challenges our perspective and equips us to face life's most difficult moments, which we will discuss next. So, let's move on. Have you ever been in a moment of complete chaos where it seemed like everything was spinning out of control, but then all of a sudden, something changed? In Philippians 4:7, Paul writes about a piece of information that defies human logic. And it's not a coincidence if it brings a sense of peace that seems out of place given the circumstances, a direction, a thought, or simply an inexplicable certainty that things will fall into place. Extraordinary peace that defies comprehension. What's more astounding is that he composes it while enduring exceedingly trying conditions in prison. He wasn't in a comfortable or safe place, but he felt an inner calm that overcame his circumstances. This calm didn't stem from a lack of problems, but from having faith in God is like being at the bottom of an ocean. On the surface, the waves crash and shake everything around, but deep down, there is a constant calm. God invites us to stay at this depth even when life's storms try to knock us down. It doesn't mean that. In Matthew 8:22-32, Jesus showed His followers a practical example of inner peace. They were crossing a lake in a boat when a violent storm came, and they were terrified that the boat would sink. Jesus, however, was sleeping, and they couldn't fathom how He could calmly remain awake and steadfast. Can find tranquility in the midst of mayhem, but upon awakening, Jesus merely commanded the wind and waves to cease, and they did as He said. This incident demonstrated not only Jesus' power, but also the way in which trusting Him brings peace to life's stormiest times. It's as if He were to say, "If I am with you, the tempest outside will not be able to overcome the peace that is within you." God wants us to remember that even in the midst of chaos, He can bring a peace that changes our perspective on the situation. Perhaps you are currently facing waves of problems at home, with important decisions to make, work pressures, or even health issues that seem insurmountable. In these times, He wants to anchor our thoughts with a firm anchor. Remember a time when you could relax and trust in a higher power even though you didn't have all the answers. God is there in the middle of your troubles, ready to whisper thoughts of peace and clarity. The world may be a frightening place, but you can find solace in knowing that He is with you. Even in the midst of a storm, there is still a way to find peace. This is just one way He speaks to us. Now let's delve even deeper into this topic and see how those tough decisions can be a sign from on high. What's coming up next could be the solution your heart has been searching for, so don't leave until you hear this part that ties everything together in a special way. We can't always tell when a thought originates from God. The mind is a complex place filled with both internal and external influences. However, we can recognize when a thought originates from God because it always brings peace, even when it doesn't make sense. Prompts us to take action without delay, relieving our fears and despair. Instead, it gives us a sense of assurance, as if to say, everything is under control. Just trust. Picture this. You're faced with a significant decision at work, like whether to take on a new challenge, switch departments, or even quit. Project that is no longer making sense. In the midst of all the options, a new and seemingly different idea comes to mind. It doesn't fix everything right away, but it does teach us what to do next. This is a classic example of how God directs our steps, giving us a direction that doesn't demand haste, but instead invites trust. The Bible gives us a profound. Here's an example from Isaiah 30:15. Repentance and rest is your salvation in quietness, and trust is your strength. This verse reminds us that real strength doesn't come from trying to control everything or being constantly on the go, but rather from completely trusting God and allowing ourselves to rest even in the midst of chaos. In the midst of life's storms, there is a space where His peace can operate, guiding us toward direction. So, before you go to sleep tonight, take a few minutes to reflect on the ideas that came to mind during the day. Ask yourself, which of these thoughts brought you peace and clarity? Write them down if you need to. You might just discover that God have been trying to get your attention for a while now, but you've been too busy to listen. Following this easy exercise will help you see the divine presence in your thoughts in a new light. When we learn to recognize the thoughts that accompany peace, extraordinary things start to happen. Often these thoughts come with invitations to take action, and some of these actions can challenge us. Every belief we hold about ourselves, our capabilities, and the boundaries of what is possible is tested here. In the next part of this journey, we will examine how persistent thoughts, particularly those with significant weight, can be a chance for growth and a stronger bond with God's plan for our lives. This weight that many of us feel can be more than just worry or indecision. It can be a sign of something bigger, an opportunity, or even a divine intervention. Decisions seem to follow us, no matter how hard we try to ignore them. They pop into our minds at the most unexpected moments, sometimes in the middle of small talk or the dead of night, like constant reminders that refuse to go away. An example of a compelling calling is the story of Jonah. God had asked him to preach in the city of Nineveh, whose people were desperately in need of salvation. But Jonah, terrified of the punishment, and maybe even doubting his own abilities, ran away. In Jonah 1:3, it is written that he boarded a ship headed for Tarshish. The story teaches us a powerful lesson. No matter how hard we try, there are decisions that follow us because they carry a heavy burden. Jonah tried to escape this burden, but even on the high seas, he could not escape the call. As a result, a violent storm arose, putting everyone on board in danger. Jonah knew that this was all because he was trying to avoid the decision that God had placed before him. More meaningful purpose, something that extends beyond ourselves. Disregarding this calling does not alleviate it. Rather, it makes it heavier on our hearts. Making this choice is like trying to ignore the pain of carrying a heavy backpack. At first, you convince yourself that you can keep going, but eventually, the burden becomes too much to bear. Sometimes, when you're trying to avoid something, it becomes too much to bear, and you have to stop and deal with it. Other times, though, It's a sign that you need to grow and change. Maybe you're in a relationship that's unhealthy, but you're afraid to end it because of the uncertainty. Or maybe you're facing a career change that you know you should make, but are afraid to. The thought keeps coming back as if to say you need to deal with it. If this is the case for you, ask yourself what decision is weighing on your mind today. It could be a comforting attachment to the past, a call to start something new, a project, a ministry, or a leap of faith that defies your logic. Maybe it's not a burden at all, but an invitation from God to something bigger. Just like Jonah, you might be avoiding something that you can't ignore any longer. But just like Jonah, you might discover that facing this decision, no matter how difficult it is the way to change. Difficult times are chances to reassess our priorities and reaffirm our trusting in God and letting Him lead us in the direction of His will for our lives. Are you prepared to face the decision that lies ahead, the one that could alter your entire course? In Matthew 26:39, we witness Jesus' humanity as He faced a decision that had far-reaching consequences. The weight of the decision was immense, but Jesus prayed, "Father, if it is possible, remove this cup from me. However, not as I will, but as you will." Despite knowing full well the pain, betrayal, and suffering that would follow, He still obeyed the Father's plan. Whole submission, having faith that God's plan is bigger than any difficulty we might encounter, just as Jesus did in Gethsemane. We all encounter times when we are compelled to make decisions that appear daunting, but it's vital to bear in mind that tough choices frequently bring about development and change. In the book of Jonah, for instance, after he resisted God's call and attempted to evade his mission, he ultimately went to Nineveh and brought the word the Lord had commanded. The outcome was astounding. The whole city repented and turned away from evil. Jonah's decision, which he had put off for a long time, had an effect on thousands of people's lives. This shows that answering these calls and enduring the consequences of our choices can have a bigger influence than we realize. Maybe what you're facing right now is actually a chance for God to do something amazing in your life and the lives of those around you. But how can you transform that burden into purpose? First, seek clarity by praying to God to reveal whether or not this persistent thought is truly from Him. Then, when we bring our fears and doubts to Him, He will show us the next step. First, pray to God for the wisdom to understand what needs doing. Secondly, don't try to solve everything at once. Sometimes just praying yes or making a first decision is enough. Lastly, have faith in the process. Just as Jonah had to cross a rough sea and Jesus had to endure suffering on the way to the cross, so too can our path be challenging, but God never gives us burdens without a purpose. If something is nagging at you, maybe it's time to stop reflecting and face what God is asking of you when we face. The outcome is always worth it when we follow His purpose. Now ask yourself, what decision have you been ignoring, and what burden has been weighing you down? It could be that God is using this burden to call you to something greater. This message has the potential to touch not only your life, but also the lives of the people you care about. Have you ever considered the ripple effect it could have on your loved ones? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how God has spoken to your heart through these challenging decisions. In the next topic, we'll look at how these thoughts can be a divine invitation for something new. Occasionally, our minds seem hell-bent on whisking us away from our safe havens. These thoughts, while offering opportunities for great change, also pose challenges to our established ways of being. Until we give them some attention, they'll keep popping up like little sparks that nudge us out of our comfort zones and towards the destiny God has planned for us. Moses exemplifies this type of calling. After leading a peaceful life as a shepherd in the desert for many years, he was taken aback by an unusual sight, a bush on fire that refused to burn. Intrigued, Moses approached the burning bush and heard God's voice, Exodus 31:10. From that moment on, everything changed. God then appointed Moses to lead the Israelites. The task of leading the Israelites out of Egypt's slavery appeared insurmountable to Moses, who, like many of us, initially made excuses like, "I don't speak well," and "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" These statements reveal his fear and inadequacy in the face of what appeared to be an overwhelming calling. Perhaps accomplish, but God was adamant, demonstrating that it wasn't about Moses' abilities, but rather what he would do through him. These thoughts that test our boundaries are like a nest. At first, it's safe, familiar, and cozy. However, eventually, we must leave it to learn to fly, which means confronting the unknown, overcoming fear, and taking risks. Taking that initial unsettling step forward, even when we don't have a clear picture of what lies ahead, is essential if we are to develop and realize our full potential. Perhaps you are currently facing a challenge that is compelling you to embark on a new endeavor, alter your professional trajectory, make a long-awaited spiritual decision, or confront a challenging personal situation. Take a leap of faith, build a relationship, or tackle a seemingly insurmountable task. These thoughts don't happen often, but they are indications that God is at work within you, calling you to something greater. Ask yourself, what thought have I been ignoring because it seems difficult or scary? The answer may lie in the fact that it is precisely what God wants to use to change you, just as it did with Moses. Never ignore these thoughts. They could be the start of a life-altering journey that will transform you in ways you can't even begin to fathom. Remember that God doesn't choose the capable, but He enables the chosen. Leaving your comfort zone isn't easy, but it's in the unknown that we discover the greatest opportunities for growth and connection with God. Are you prepared to pay attention and take action? The man who would become Saul, had strong beliefs and a mission to kill Christians. He was a passionate man who was sure he was doing the right thing. But on the way to Damascus, he experienced a shocking and life-altering event that pushed him out of his comfort zone. A light shone around him, and he heard Jesus' voice. Acts 9:1-6 tells the story of Saul, the persecutor turned Apostle Paul, who preached the gospel in a way no one had gone before. This story teaches us that God frequently uses difficult situations to change us, and that He challenges us to leave our comfort zones and do what He wants us to do. We are not born into this world to be passive recipients of thoughts. Rather, we are invited by the divine to develop our spiritual selves, learn to trust Him, and embark on a journey beyond our wildest dreams. How can we identify these thoughts? By regularly asking ourselves, does this thought challenge me to grow spiritually? And does it bring me closer to God's purpose for me? It's normal to feel insecure when you hear a calling. In fact, it's expected. However, the good news is that God never calls without preparing us. He walks with us, giving us strength and wisdom to face each challenge. Second, trust in the calling. Just as Moses and Paul felt insecure at first, so can you. Like Peter in Matthew 14:28-29, who doubted his abilities but put his faith in Jesus' word and stepped out onto the water, we too can grow when we face our fears and take that first step, even though we may sink at first. Every little step we take, no matter how big or little, is a step toward the greater good that God has planned for our lives. Now let's get down to brass tacks. Picture this. You've been praying about how you can make a difference in your community, and the idea of launching a social project or even just helping out a friend in need keeps popping into your head, but you're also worried about whether you'll ever have the time or money to actually do it. Sometimes, all it takes is a small act of obedience from you to multiply the impact of your efforts. Today, take a moment to reflect on what nagging thoughts you're experiencing. It's possible that God is using them to prepare you for something extraordinary, similar to how Paul was used by Him. Embarking on the path to Damascus, you too can undergo a life-altering transformation. Thoughts that test your comfort zone invite you to grow, but there are other ideas that sneak up on us like a bolt of lightning, giving us fresh perspectives and a new way of looking at things. Let's discuss this further below. Have you ever experienced that moment when, out of nowhere, an idea popped into your head and made you pause and think? It could have been while you were stuck in traffic on the way to work, or even during a break, but all of a sudden, it was like a light bulb went off, illuminating something that had been in the dark. It could have been something little, but it brought During this time, Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the Persian king, a position of great prestige and stability. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he learned of the destruction of Jerusalem's walls and the utter desolation of his people. Was deeply affected and consumed by the overwhelming desire to rebuild his city's walls. According to Nehemiah 1:3, he prayed, fasted, and wept for days before leaving the comfort of the palace to lead a difficult mission that would alter his people's history. These sudden insights are like forks in the road. You can choose to continue along one path or the other. There's the safe, familiar route, or there's the unknown, which is both terrifying and full of potential. In these times, God calls us to action, urging us to leave our comfort zones and follow Him towards something we've never dreamed of before. Consider real-life examples. You're unhappy in your job, but afraid to leave because you're afraid of what others will think, or you've neglected a significant relationship and keep having the urge to get back in touch. Or you wanted to start a new project or learn something new, but quickly let the idea fade. Notion because it appeared impossible. These ideas are frequently indications that God is attempting to reveal something greater than what you are currently facing. They arrive as a call to view life from a new perspective. They don't necessarily provide answers or assurances of success, but they do transmit the sense that you must attend to them. God operates in this manner, urging us to rely on Him as we embark on our initial endeavors. Embarking on an adventure into the unknown, take a moment to reflect on the last time an idea challenged your routine. Were you able to dismiss it due to fear or insecurity, or did you consider the possibility that it was a call to something greater, like Nehemiah's inability to ignore the summons to rebuild Jerusalem? Maybe this idea is from God. It's time to take action, but are you ready to step off the beaten path and follow this new path? Surprising insights can change our lives, but sometimes they reveal who needs us more than we expect. Let's discuss this next. Gideon was going through a very difficult period in his life while he was a judge. 6:114. He was threshing wheat in a winepress, hiding from the Midianites who had oppressed Israel for years. He was trying to survive, devoid of any sense of heroism or higher purpose. Suddenly, an angel appeared to him, describing him as a mighty man of valor and telling him. The statement had a profound impact on Gideon, who perceived himself as small and limited. It challenged him to believe that God had selected him for an extraordinary task. That moment altered Gideon's course. He could have disregarded the call, but he listened and took action. Like Gideon, we are frequently asked to question our identity and the things we do. These fleeting thoughts that arise do not always align with our plans. However, taking these initial steps, despite his uncertainties, was driven by the idea that he could lead and change his people's history. Inspire us, but also to push us to our limits and change who we are. The trick is to learn to recognize when these ideas pop into our heads and take action on them. They can strike at any moment, whether we're driving, working, relaxing, or even just having a casual conversation. After giving it some thought, the second step is to consider its purpose. Ask yourself, is this idea going to help me grow, change, or serve others? It usually has a clear purpose to serve others, develop my skills, or make a positive impact. Lastly, trust the process. Nehemiah had no idea what he was getting into. If you're watching this video and suddenly feel the desire to start something new, it could be a social project, an initiative in your church, or even just a new endeavor in general. It's realistic to say that growth occurs along the way, not at the starting point. Just like Gog, who faced battles and challenges as he learned to trust God's purpose, you must begin with a step of faith. Don't dismiss this idea just because it's small or seems impossible. It could be a divine invitation to make a difference in people's lives. God often uses these impulses to tell us that He wants to use us for something extraordinary. Take some time today to think and write about this. Jot down all the thoughts that pop into your head. Some of these ideas could be the start of a life-changing journey. Don't be afraid to investigate these possibilities, even if they appear daunting. You never know. These ideas could end up changing not just your own path, but the lives of those around you. Those epiphanies can change everything. Have you ever experienced the sudden and seemingly random recollection of someone's face or name? It could be a long-lost friend, a distant relative, or even someone you see frequently but never really considered their struggles. These memories, rather than a fresh idea, often motivate us to take action. We will delve more into this example later on. Divine intervention, as if God were beckoning you to do something significant that no one else could. The account of Cornelius and Peter in Acts 10 provides a compelling illustration of how God orchestrates serendipitous encounters to bring about His purposes. While praying, Peter had a peculiar vision that he failed to. Instantly grasping its significance, Cornelius, a man of genuine faith seeking spiritual answers, was also given explicit instructions to invite Peter to his home. When Peter arrived, he realized their meeting had been orchestrated by God, who wanted Cornelius and his family to hear the gospel and experience a life-changing transformation. God may be attempting to use you to bless someone's life, offer a word of comfort, make a gesture of assistance, or even just be silently present by their side. Consider something practical, like working or watching. These sudden reminders, like Peter's by Cornelius, are like divine notifications in our hearts. Ignoring them is like leaving an important message unanswered. While watching this video or unwinding at home, you might have a sudden memory of a friend you haven't seen in a while. It could be a sign that they're going through a tough time and could use your support. Even something as simple as a "how are you" text could go a long way. When we take the time to respond to unexpected messages, we often find that God is using us to make a difference. It's possible that the person you're helping has been praying for a sign that they are not alone or an answer to their prayers, and your action is providing just that. Think about the last time someone unexpectedly crossed your path and what you did about it. Maybe it is time to respond with love and courage to these divine promptings, just as Peter answered the call to find Cornelius. You too can be the bridge between someone and a moment of transformation. Remembering someone can change their life, but it can also change yours. In the next section, we will explore how facing our internal struggles can lead to peace and release. Jesus shares the incredible story of the Good Samaritan in Luke 103:37. It is a powerful example of how responding to a call can change lives. In this parable, a man was brutally attacked by robbers and left injured by the side of the road. Several people, including a priest and a Levite, who were both in positions of spiritual authority, passed by him but did not stop to help. Eventually, a Samaritan came along. The Good Samaritan was in the perfect spot at the perfect time. He stopped what he was doing, felt sorry for the man, and helped him recover from his injuries. This incredible act of kindness not only saved the man's life, but it also taught us a valuable lesson about the importance of responding to our inner calls to help those in need. When we respond with compassion, it can make a world of difference. So, how can we handle these reminders that God puts on our hearts? First, it doesn't take much to show care and love. A simple phone call, text message, or brief visit can do the trick. If you're stuck and don't know how to brighten someone's day, take a moment to pray for guidance. God will often show you exactly what to do, whether it's providing financial assistance, volunteering your time, or even interceding on their behalf in prayer. Lastly, just being there for someone, whether that's through listening or offering advice, is often enough. Being present is a form of love that doesn't need words, but it communicates a lot. For instance, imagine if you're thinking about someone who is financially struggling and the thought keeps coming back to you. You might feel compelled to do something to help. As you listen to these words, consider the impact that your small gesture can have on someone in need. Even if you can't solve all of their problems, you can at least help them find resources or connect them with people who can. Remember, even the smallest act can make a profound difference. Responding to these reminders is a powerful way to touch others and achieve God's purpose. However, there are times when the load we feel makes it difficult to behave compassionately and lovingly. Do not disregard this sensation. It might be God calling you. What's really going on inside us, rather than with other people, is something we need to confront head on. Let's delve into this next point. Have you ever experienced that unmistakable sensation of having something heavy pressing down on your heart? Something that won't go away no matter how much you try to ignore it? This burden is not a punishment, but a divine summons to deal with what is incomplete in your life. The story of David and the prophet Nathan is a good example of this type of situation. It may be a neglected responsibility, an opportunity you've been avoiding because of fear or insecurity, or anything else that needs addressing. Following his adultery with Bathsheba and plot to kill Uriah, David attempted to carry on with his life as if nothing had transpired. However, he couldn't shake the weight of his actions and knew that something was amiss. In 2 Samuel 121:7, the prophet Nathan was sent by God to confront David. Nathan shared a parable with David. The weight on David's heart was like a stone in his shoe. At first he could ignore it, but eventually he had to face it head on. At that point, he admitted his sins and repented deeply. And the confrontation not only brought relief, but also marked a new beginning in his spiritual journey. Dealing with what's bothering you, regardless of how uncomfortable it is, often brings relief and opens the door to transformation. Maybe this burden in your life is connected to a tough conversation you've been avoiding, but as you continue walking, the pain grows, becoming impossible to ignore. If you're going through a tough time, it could be because you need to talk to someone about something you've been avoiding, like asking for forgiveness, resolving a conflict, or finally expressing yourself. It could also be because you have a lot of important decisions to make, either at work or in your personal life, and you're afraid to make a mistake, or because you're too comfortable staying where you are. Whatever the case may be, this pain could be a sign from God that you need to. God doesn't put problems on our hearts for no reason. He calls us to face them and provides the strength and wisdom we need to overcome them. If you're feeling overwhelmed, take a moment to reflect on what you've been ignoring recently and whether it's something He wants you to face. Can help you overcome them, just like David found renewal and relief by facing his mistakes and seeking repentance. You may also discover that facing what you've been avoiding brings peace, growth, and a new phase in your journey. Are you ready to let go of that burden and follow Jonah, who is one of the clearest examples of this? In the story of Jonah, we see the consequences of attempting to disregard the weight on our hearts. God had asked him to preach repentance at Nineveh, but instead he ran away to Taurus, boarded a ship, and thought he could escape his purpose. However, the weight of his disobedience became apparent when a violent storm threatened the lives of those around him. Upon reaching Nineveh to deliver God's message, Jonah witnessed a transformation he had never imagined possible. The entire city repented, and everyone on board, including himself, realized that it was due to his escape in Jonah 111:12. In an act of surrender, Jonah asked to be thrown overboard, acknowledging his responsibility and calming the storm. This moment of surrender also set him back on the path that God had planned for him, and made a change for the better. This story shows us that despite the discomfort, facing our hearts can bring about amazing things for ourselves and those around us. But how can we cope with this weight that won't leave us alone? Like David, we must first admit that something is wrong. Being open and honest about our struggles is a courageous move, not a sign of weakness. It's the first step towards making changes. Then, seek wisdom. Praying in silence can help us understand God's will. Ask Him, Lord, what challenges do I need to face? How can I best deal with them? Oftentimes the answers we seek are best found in quiet reflection. Getting answers and the courage to act is like opening a Pandora's box. Resolving what's bothering us isn't always easy, but it's essential to creating space for growth and peace. It could be an awkward conversation, an apology, or a commitment you've been avoiding because you're afraid you'll fail. Think about a real-life example. Maybe you're carrying around an emotional debt, like an unpaid apology or a reconciliation that you've been putting off because you're ashamed of how you feel. Resolving this can be challenging, but it can also heal the relationship and alleviate your pain, just like Jonah's experience. Needed to take ownership of his actions before moving on, and you can do the same. Today, take stock of what's bothering you. Is there anything you've been putting off dealing with that, if resolved, could bring you clarity and peace? If so, pray about it. God is always willing to lend you the strength you need to overcome obstacles. Dealing with what we ignore allows us to grow, but sometimes what disturbs us isn't a burden, but an enigmatic charm with something new that changes our purpose. We'll discuss this more later. Occasionally, we're taken aback by something that catches our eye in. Some ideas, interests, or even random encounters have a way of reawakening dormant parts of us. This enchantment, which forces us out of our comfort zones and into fresh perspectives, is frequently more than just a case of curiosity. It can herald a deep personal transformation or even a divine invitation to. On the road to Damascus, Paul, formerly Saul, had a profound epiphany. He had been a devout enemy of Christians, fully committed to eradicating the new faith. However, in Acts 93-6, something miraculous occurred. A brilliant light engulfed him, and he collapsed to the ground, his ears hearing a voice asking, "Saul, why do you persecute me?" Captivated Saul, but not in a pleasant way. It was an abrupt interruption that caused him to reevaluate his entire worldview. Yet, he overcame this adversity and went on to become one of the greatest apostles of all time, Paul, tirelessly preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Although you may be unsure of your destination or the path to get there, the guiding light will show you the way. This is a call to trust that God will provide further clarity as you journey. If you are experiencing similar thoughts, such as a longing to start something new or a desire to help others, it could be a sign that you are about to embark on a new chapter in your life. If you've ever felt a strong pull toward a social project, a subject that has fascinated you for a long time, but you've never mustered the guts to investigate, or a cause that stirs up profound emotions and leaves you wondering, what can I do? These enchantments are often more than just passing interests. They're indications that God is beckoning you to a higher calling. In these moments of wonder, which may appear uncomfortable or challenging at first, you may discover that you are being led to something much greater than you ever imagined. Trust and take the first step, and you may find that God is showing you a new path, one you haven't considered before, that could change everything, just like Paul on the road to Damascus. Don't ignore these signs. They could be thee. Moses was going about his father-in-law's sheep-tending routine when he noticed something out of the ordinary, a bush that was on fire and refused to budge. This was the beginning of a journey that would change not only what he did, but who he is. In the next point, we will examine what happens when these changes lead us to realize that we are in the right place at the right time with a greater purpose. In Exodus 3:24, it is mentioned that as Moses drew near, he perceived a voice from God beckoning him to free the Israelites from slavery. This encounter not only thrilled Moses, but it also refocused his purpose. He abandoned the familiarity of his routine to take on an impossible mission, trusting in God's plan. Similar to Moses, we can all relate to those times when something catches our attention and captivates us, igniting an irresistible curiosity or desire. The question then becomes, how can we recognize and address these enchantments? One approach is to take stock of our own unique emotional responses. These moments can evoke a wide range of feelings, from joy to sadness. Reflecting on the significance of your feelings, whether they be a sense of urgency or not, can help you discern if they are a divine calling. The second step is to be open to new experiences. Just as Moses did not turn a blind eye to the burning bush, but instead paused to listen and watch, so too should you not rush to dismiss something that catches your eye and moves you emotionally. It could be a desire, an idea, or a revelation. If you're seeking knowledge or feel compelled to join a bigger cause, taking a moment to listen is a courageous act of trusting God and being receptive to what He may be teaching you. Just like Paul on the way to Damascus or Moses in the wilderness, you might not have all the answers or feel secure or competent at first, but trusting God is the most important thing. Over time, His purpose is revealed, guiding your decisions and empowering you. For example, imagine you want to work with youth in your community, but don't know how to begin. Maybe this idea was inspired by a conversation, a personal experience, or even a video like this one. The first step could be to volunteer, even if it's just a simple event or organizing. Take a moment to reflect on what has recently intrigued you or moved you. It could be the start of something big that God is planning to do in your life, changing not just what you do, but who you are. Don't dismiss that feeling. It could be the turning point that guides you towards your life's greater purpose. These enchanting moments are. God's guidance can be profound, but there are times when it's even more enigmatic, the sense that we're in the right place at the right time. Have you ever had an experience like this, where you felt compelled to be somewhere, even without knowing why? Maybe it was a chance meeting or some other unforeseen event. An uplifting illustration of this can be found in the life of Esther, a young Jewish woman who, against all odds, achieved great success in spite of overwhelming odds. Similarly, there have been seemingly random events in your life that, upon closer inspection, have shown a higher purpose or a divine plan. It appeared like everything was going swimmingly for Odys as Queen of Persia, but then the Jewish people faced the horrible threat of extermination, and she had to make a terrible choice: risk her life by pleading with the king, or stay silent and let her people's fate be sealed. Then her cousin Morai said something that changed everything. Maybe you were not made queen for such a time as this. Esther 4:14. Esther's realization that she was in the right place at the right time to fulfill a greater purpose was revealed in the depths of that moment. With courage, she presented herself to the king and interceded to save her people. These moments can be likened to pieces of a puzzle. At first, they seem disconnected, and the bigger picture is hard to see. However, when the time comes, the pieces start to fit together, and the story unfolds. The meaning behind everything becomes apparent as you go through life's encounters, choices, and challenges. Eventually, they all come together to form a plan that surpasses your wildest dreams. Perhaps you can relate. An unexpected meeting that led to opportunities, a kind word from a stranger when you needed it most, or a chance encounter that materialized just when you thought your world was collapsing. That moment in time to make a difference. Take a moment to think about the moments in your life that you feel were more than just coincidences. Perhaps it was a conversation that motivated someone, a choice that affected a family, or even adversity that brought out your hidden strengths. These moments aren't random. They're invitations to trust that God is bringing all the pieces of your life together. Life's unexpected twists and turns, whether they're opportunities for growth or challenges that test your mettle, can shape our perspective on our own story. So the next time you feel like you're at the perfect place at the right time, take a moment to reflect and give thanks. God may be utilizing you in a special way to accomplish something truly remarkable. And speaking of extraordinary things, there are also. In the next point, we will discuss those moments when something that doesn't make sense moves us with incredible force. Joseph, the son of Jacob, is a powerful example of someone who witnessed the unfolding of God's plan amidst the most difficult of circumstances. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused in Potiphar's house, and forgotten in prison for years. His journey appeared to be when Joseph finally reunited with his brothers in Genesis 455, he told them, "Do not be angry or resentful about me because you sold me. God sent me ahead of you to save lives at that time. This was just one of many seemingly random and unfair events that led him to realize that God was using them all to put him in the right place." The story teaches us that even when we don't understand why we are in certain situations, God has a greater plan. What can we do when we recognize and respond to these moments? First, trust that God has a purpose for us. After Joseph saw the bigger picture, he realized that everything he had gone through was not in vain. God had placed him in Egypt to save his family during the famine and to become a provider for many others. Always be vigilant in these times of revealed purpose, even when circumstances seem perplexing or unjust. Recall that Joseph, who faced difficulties, continued to trust God and labor with integrity wherever he was. God calls us to bold, faith-filled actions, just as Esther did when she stood up to intercede for her people. When the opportunity arises, we may have to take risks or leave our comfort zones, but it's in doing so that we can find the impact God wants us to have. Ultimately, we should do our best, no matter where we are. As an example of how God can use your commitment to being your best self, regardless of your circumstances, to accomplish greater things, consider the life of Moses. He was a faithful servant in prison. He was honored for his wisdom in Pharaoh's palace, and he led Egypt with excellence. While you're in the midst of a tough work environment, dealing with difficult people or tasks that don't seem to have anything to do with your dreams, you notice that your presence is influencing those around you, whether it's through words of encouragement, acts of kindness, or your ethical stance. God may be using you, even if it's only for a short while. So, take a moment to reflect on how you're impacting those around you. Being in the right place sometimes is a gift of divine guidance, but other times it's a conviction so strong that it makes us get over your fears and keep moving forward. Some of life's choices defy logic. They force us to leave our comfort zones, face our deepest fears, and leave us open to doubt. Despite these obstacles, there's always a strong conviction that propels us forward. A deep certainty that at times appears illogical is actually God's way of calling us to. After Moses passed away, the burden of leading Israel to the Promised Land fell on Joshua. This was no small feat. He had to confront formidable foes, rally an entire nation, and continue in the great leadership tradition begun by Moses. Joshua had every reason to be frightened and hesitant, but he acted courageously and with faith. After receiving God's promise and encouragement in Joshua 1:9, which read, "Be strong and courageous, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go," Joshua was able to overcome his fears and doubts, cross the Jordan River, and begin conquest of Canaan. When reason told him his people couldn't handle the job, this story shows us that when God